There's a quiet revolution happening right now, not in corporate towers or boardrooms, but in dorm rooms, cafes, shared co-working spaces, and even on cracked phone screens. It's being led by young people who aren't waiting their turn. They're not asking for permission. They're turning their ideas into action, their passions into products, and their questions into companies. And the world is taking notice, not because someone told them they were ready, but because they decided they were. This isn't about someday, this is about now. Youth are not preparing to build the future, they're already building it. It starts as a whisper in the back of the mind, a question, an irritation, or an observation about how the world could be better. That's how most great ideas are born, not in board meetings, but in frustration, curiosity, or even boredom. And in the hands of young people, those small sparks often become revolutions. Not every idea turns into $1 billion company. But the ones that do, almost always, start with someone young enough to still believe in the impossible and old enough to act on it. We often ask, where will the next breakthrough come from? It won't come from someone who's mastered the past. It'll come from someone who questions why things are still done that way. Youth have the advantage of not being weighed down by the way things have always been. They see systems not as sacred, but as flawed and fixable. They see problems as puzzles. They don't say if only. They ask, what if? But having an idea is the easy part. Everyone has ideas. The difference between a daydream and a business is execution. It's late nights, learning from mistakes, understanding your customer, and staying focused when distractions scream for attention. It's shipping a version that's not perfect, because waiting for perfect means never launching at all. It's getting feedback you don't want to hear and still coming back the next day to improve. One of the most dangerous myths in business is that you need to wait until you're ready, but ready never comes. And frankly, most of the tools and knowledge you need are already in your pocket, or one Google search away. The startup capital, the software, the global distribution. It's all far more accessible today than it has ever been. The real question is, what are you doing with that access? Some of the most impactful companies of our time started with nothing more than a student's perspective and a laptop. They didn't have big offices or corporate funding. They had clarity. They saw a problem that mattered to them and refused to accept it as permanent. That mindset is worth more than any venture capital. Of course, youth doesn't mean you don't need help. It just means you need the right kind of help. Mentors who challenge you, not coddle you. Partners who build with you, not just advise from the sidelines. Investors who believe in long-term value, not short-term exits. Surrounding yourself with people who demand your best is the fastest way to become your best. But let me be clear, business is not just about making money, not anymore. The businesses that will matter most in the next 10, 20, 30 years will be the ones that solve real human problems. Clean energy, accessible health care, digital literacy, ethical AI. These aren't charity cases. They're trillion-dollar opportunities, but they require vision bigger than profit and a mission deeper than marketing. The youth of today aren't waiting for someone else to fix the world. They're doing it themselves. They're coding solutions in their bedrooms, organizing communities online, building new economic models on blockchain, redefining how value is created and shared. They're not asking for permission. They're building without it. If you're young and you have an idea, you don't need to have all the answers. You just need to care enough to find them. You don't need a 10-year plan. You need a one-day commitment, and then repeat that 365 times. What you do now, how you use your time, your attention, your energy, will determine whether your idea stays a note in your phone or becomes something the world remembers. So start small, stay curious, build responsibly, and above all, keep showing up, because the world doesn't change in a lightning strike. It changes when thousands of young minds take one determined step at a time toward a future they believe in. The future of business isn't in some distant tomorrow. It's already under construction. In coffee shops, college dorms, and community centers across the world, and the builders are not waiting. They're not asking, they're doing. So, to every young person listening, we're not here to watch you someday lead. We're here because you already are. Let me know if you'd like this adapted for a different tone, shorter version, or a script with camera cues. The world doesn't lack ideas. Every day, in every corner of the planet, someone comes up with a way to make life easier, smarter, or more efficient. Ideas are everywhere, and conversations, in frustrations, in dreams. They're the easy part. What the world truly lacks is execution. Taking a thought and turning it into a plan, then turning that plan into action, and continuing that action even when it gets hard. This is the rarest currency of progress. Many people fall in love with their ideas. They write them down, sketch them out, maybe even talk about them at length. But that's not building, that's imagining. There's a difference. Imagining is safe. Execution is where things get uncomfortable. It's where flaws appear, where assumptions get tested, where real-world constraints challenge ideal world visions. And that's precisely why it matters so much more. Because anything that survives the fire of execution has real potential. The rest, just clever thoughts floating in silence. What separates impactful people from dreamers is rarely intelligence. It's discipline, the discipline to start, to push through boredom, to handle rejection, and to adapt without losing the core of the mission. Discipline to stay focused when the early buzz fades and when attention is hard to come by. The novelty of a new idea is a powerful high, but long-term value is created in the days when that high disappears and all that's left is a blank screen and a long to-do list. There's also a tendency to overplan, to feel like one more week of research, one more strategy session, or one more YouTube tutorial will finally make everything click. But that's a trap. The truth is, you never have all the answers. No one ever does. Some of the most successful ventures began with less knowledge than you'd expect, but they made up for it with action. Action reveals what theory hides. You can't learn to ride a bike by reading about it. You have to get on, fall a few times, and figure out what balance actually feels like. The other thing people forget is that execution is humbling. The moment you take your idea into the world, it starts getting reshaped. Customers don't behave the way you assumed. Technology breaks, timelines slip, feedback can be brutal, but all of that is valuable because every unexpected challenge is giving you better data. Every failure is sharpening your understanding. This is how products evolve, how strategies improve, and how teams grow stronger. Without execution, none of that learning happens. You stay stuck in the illusion of brilliance instead of confronting reality. It's easy to be a critic, easy to sit on the sidelines and point out what could go wrong. It's far harder to build something and keep building it, knowing that not everyone will believe in it, that some will try to copy it, and that many won't understand it. But those who choose to build anyway, their work becomes part of the infrastructure of the future. Execution also teaches patience, not the kind that sits idle, but the kind that works relentlessly without instant reward. You plant seeds, you water them, and for weeks, sometimes months, you see nothing. That's when most people quit. But those who keep going, who trust the process, often wake up one day to see roots running deep and results beginning to show. It's not glamorous, but it's how real impact is made. Another critical part of execution is consistency. Anyone can work hard for a day, but showing up daily, iterating, making decisions, and staying grounded, that's where success compounds. And consistency isn't just about action, it's about alignment, staying true to your values, your mission, and your standards, even when cutting corners might bring faster wins. The best businesses aren't just well built, they're built on something that lasts. At the end of the day, the marketplace doesn't reward the best ideas. It rewards the ones that get delivered, that show up, that solve problems in real time for real people. And once that happens, momentum builds. One delivery leads to another. One satisfied customer tells a friend. One line of code becomes a product. One prototype becomes a company. The question isn't whether your idea is good. Chances are it is. The question is, are you willing to do what it takes to make it real, to show up when it's hard, to iterate when it breaks, and to stay focused when no one is watching? Ideas are common. Execution isn't. That's why it matters. There's something fascinating happening right now, not inside towering skyscrapers or executive boardrooms, but in small bedrooms, cluttered dorm rooms, shared workspaces, and borrowed corners of public libraries. The next generation of business isn't being shaped in marble hallways or corner offices. It's being designed by people who are still paying off their textbooks, who sleep a few feet away from their whiteboard, and who use whatever internet they can get their hands on to code late into the night. These are not just startups, they are revolutions in progress. They begin with someone who isn't yet trained to think within limits. They see a problem in the world, and they don't accept that the current solution is the best we can do. They aren't building companies to impress investors. They're building because they can't stop thinking about the problem. The hunger doesn't come from a pitch deck. It comes from a personal connection to something that feels broken, outdated, or unfair. There's power in not being part of the system yet. When you're not yet molded by corporate culture or traditional thinking, you ask different questions. You challenge assumptions. You redesign the playbook, sometimes without even knowing there was one in the first place. That's not ignorance, that's freedom. Some of the most impactful innovations have emerged from this kind of clarity, not from committee meetings, but from the raw, messy, unpolished process of trying something just to see if it works. People often misunderstand where greatness begins. They imagine high-tech labs, global strategy sessions, or large-scale rollouts. But most meaningful change starts with a prototype built out of necessity, driven by obsession, and tested on a handful of users who offer feedback not because they were paid, but because they believed in the mission. That's not romanticism, it's a fact. Over and over, this is how businesses that reshape industries begin, with someone in a tiny room with a cheap laptop and an idea that just wouldn't go away. It's also worth noting that young builders today are not just digitally fluent, they're digitally native. They don't have to unlearn outdated systems to imagine new ones. They don't need to translate their vision into a language that fits old frameworks. They think in code, in networks, in communities. They instinctively know how to leverage platforms, how to distribute value globally, and how to connect with users across borders. That ability isn't a luxury anymore. It's a superpower. Another thing that makes these door-room entrepreneurs unique is their relationship with failure. They don't see it as an end. They see it as feedback. When your costs are low and your expectations are rooted in learning rather than instant scale, you have room to try. You experiment, you pivot, you build resilience not from corporate training but from real, lived experience. You're not waiting to be told what to do. You're figuring it out in real time. That speed of iteration is something large institutions often can't replicate. What takes a big company a year to test, a young founder with a phone and a mission can prototype in a weekend. They move fast not because they're reckless, but because they're focused. Their teams are small, their communication is instant, and their decision making isn't slowed down by layers of approval. That agility is what gives them an edge. They don't just disrupt industries, they bypass them. Of course, there's no guarantee. Not every project becomes a success, but even when these ventures don't scale, they train the mind, they build skills, they expand networks. They set the foundation for the next idea, which is often even better than the first. Each attempt increases the chances that the next one will make it all the way. And when one of them finally does, it doesn't just build a company, it builds a movement. It's time to recognize that innovation is no longer limited by geography, age, or formality. The best ideas are not asking for permission, they're being typed out at 2 a.m. in shared apartments, being debugged between classes, and being pitched over coffee tables, not conference tables, and they're gaining traction. Users don't care where a product came from, they care if it works, if it solves a problem, if it feels like it was built for them. The truth is, the people building tomorrow's economy aren't waiting to graduate. They're already building, they're not in the back of the room, they're at the front of the next wave, and they're not wondering whether they belong in business. They're already running one. You said, technology isn't just a tool, it's a multiplier. Expend it 700 words without heading in Bill Gates' tone and style, but don't mention ChatGPT said, when we talk about progress, we often treat technology as a category, something separate, something other. A tool to be picked up and put down, but that's a limited way to think about it. Technology isn't just a tool anymore, it's a multiplier. It takes whatever you already have, an idea, a vision, a need, and amplifies it far beyond what would have been possible just a generation ago. Think about what used to be required to launch even a small business. Office space, hardware, infrastructure, a team of people physically in the same place. The upfront costs and logistics created a high barrier to entry. Now, a single person with a laptop and a reliable internet connection can reach customers across the globe. They can design a product, market it, take payments, deliver it digitally or coordinate shipping, and track the results in real time. What once took a staff of 20 and months of planning now happens in a weekend. Technology doesn't create motivation or ingenuity, it enhances it. It doesn't replace human thinking, it expands its reach. A good idea in the hands of someone with access to modern tools can be tested, improved, and scaled faster than ever. The multiplier effect isn't just about speed, it's about leverage. A smart solution that might once have stayed local can now be distributed worldwide. And when feedback comes in, it doesn't take months, it takes minutes. That feedback loop drives rapid improvement, and improvement, repeated over time, leads to excellence. But the real power of technology isn't just in acceleration. It's in access. Knowledge that was once locked behind expensive tuition or closed networks is now open. A teenager in a small town can learn machine learning from world-class universities for free. A young woman in a remote village can build a business using global platforms that allow her to sell, manage, and grow without ever setting foot in a bank. This is not about charity, it's about capability. And capability compounds, even in fields where progress used to be slow. Medicine, energy, agriculture. Technology is unlocking new approaches. Solutions that once required decades of research can now be modeled and simulated with enormous precision. We're seeing breakthroughs not because people suddenly got smarter, but because they have better tools. Tools that allow them to see connections others missed, process data that would have taken lifetimes to analyze, and collaborate across borders in ways that would have seemed impossible not long ago. This is what makes technology more than a neutral tool. It changes the playing field. It doesn't just help you do things better. It lets you do entirely new things, It opens up space for experimentation. It rewards creativity over conformity, and it constantly levels the hierarchy. In a traditional system, power came from resources, size, and reputation. In a technology-driven world, power comes from speed, insight, and usefulness. But as technology multiplies our capabilities, it also multiplies our responsibilities. The same systems that allow good ideas to scale quickly also allow harmful ones to spread just as fast. That's the trade-off. Every time we increase our power to do, we also increase the potential consequences of what we choose to do. That's why the people designing and using these systems need to think beyond functionality. They need to consider ethics, inclusivity, sustainability. They need to ask not just, can we do this, but also, should we? Because the truth is, technology doesn't choose sides, it follows instructions. It scales what we feed into it. So if we give it thoughtfulness, fairness, and purpose, it becomes a force for enormous good. But if we feed it greed, bias, or carelessness, it can cause harm faster and more widely than ever before. That's the reality of multipliers. They don't create content, they amplify it. That's why education matters more than ever. Not just technical literacy, but critical thinking. Not just knowing how to use tools, but understanding what those tools do to the world when applied at scale. It's not enough to code. You have to care what your code is used for. It's not enough to build fast. You have to know whether what you're building will improve the systems it touches. The potential of technology is immense. But it's not automatic. It depends on people, on how we think, what we value, and what we're willing to take responsibility for. That's what makes this moment so powerful. We have in our hands tools that were unthinkable even a decade ago. The question is, what will we multiply with them? Will it be equity or inequality, insight or distraction, solutions or shortcuts? The tools themselves won't decide, we will. You said, profit alone won't sustain. Purpose will. Expend it 700 words without heading in Bill Gates' tone and style, but don't mention ChatGPT said. When you look at the trajectory of the world's most resilient and respected businesses, a pattern becomes clear. The ones that endure, the ones that shape entire industries and redefine norms, are almost never driven solely by the pursuit of profit. They might begin that way, but over time, what keeps them relevant, trusted, and impactful is something deeper. Purpose, a clear, unwavering reason for existing that stretches beyond quarterly earnings or market share. Something that customers can believe in, employees can commit to, and communities can feel a part of. Profit is essential. It fuels operations, drives growth, and provides the resources to reinvest. But profit without purpose is fragile, it's reactionary, it responds to trends instead of setting them. It cuts corners when the numbers dip. It chases opportunity without asking if it should. And eventually it hits a wall because markets change. Consumer preferences evolve. What worked 5 years ago often doesn't work today. But when a company is grounded in purpose, it has a compass. It knows how to pivot without losing its identity. It knows how to say no when necessary. And more importantly, it knows what it's really trying to accomplish. People want to connect with more than just products. They want to know the values behind what they buy. They want to support companies that reflect their concerns and their aspirations. That's not sentimentality, it's economics. Customers reward trust. They reward integrity. When people believe in what you're doing, they come back. They tell others. They defend you when things go wrong, and they grow with you when things go right. That loyalty can't be bought through advertising or discounts. It's earned through consistency and clarity of mission. The same is true inside the organization. Talented people don't just want a paycheck. They want meaning. They want to feel like their work matters. that their time is contributing to something bigger than a line on a spreadsheet. Purpose gives people a reason to go the extra mile. It attracts those who are intrinsically motivated, who bring energy and innovation, and who stay even when things get tough. A culture that's rooted in purpose can outperform a culture driven only by competition. Because in the long run, inspiration is more powerful than fear. There's also a structural advantage. Purpose brings focus. It helps filter decisions. In a world full of opportunities and distractions, having a clear sense of why you exist can prevent wasteful detours. It aligns product development, marketing, customer service, and leadership. It turns a business into a system where every part is pulling in the same direction. That kind of alignment is hard to measure, but you feel it when it's there, and you definitely feel it when it's missing. Purpose doesn't mean you avoid hard choices. It means you make them with context. You're not deciding based on what's easiest or cheapest. You're deciding based on what's consistent with your reason for being. That's not always popular in the short term, but it builds credibility over time, and credibility, once earned, becomes one of the most valuable assets a business can have. It allows you to innovate without constantly having to reintroduce yourself. It gives you the benefit of the doubt, and it creates room to lead, not just compete. In today's world, the line between business and society is blurring. Whether it's climate change, access to education, public health, or digital security, businesses are expected to have a voice and a role. Not because it's fashionable, but because scale comes with responsibility. When your product reaches millions or billions, you're shaping behavior, policy, and opportunity, whether you intend to or not. Ignoring that isn't neutrality, it's negligence. Purpose is what ensures that your impact is intentional and positive. This doesn't mean sacrificing profitability. In fact, when purpose is real and embedded, it enhances profitability. Because it creates long-term trust, it reduces turnover, it attracts partners who share your vision, it opens doors to markets that respect sustainability, fairness, and transparency. It insulates you from reputational risk. And it energizes innovation because your team isn't just solving technical problems, they're solving human ones. A business without purpose may survive, but it won't lead. It will chase instead of setting direction. It will spend more to gain less. It will struggle to retain talent and build loyalty. But a business with purpose can withstand crises, adapt to change, and leave a legacy, not just of wealth, but of value. Not just of growth, but of meaning. And in the long run, that's what really lasts. You said, youth aren't the future of business, they're the present. Expend it 700 words without heading in Bill Gates' tone and style, but don't mention ChatGPT said. We often hear people say, youth are the future. It's said with admiration, sometimes with optimism, but too often it overlooks something more urgent. They're not just the future, they're the present. Right now, today, young people are not waiting to be handed responsibility. They are assuming it, not after they graduate, not after they're hired, not after someone validates their readiness. They're building products, leading movements, starting companies, solving problems, many of them global in scale, because they don't need permission to participate. They're already in the arena. This generation grew up in a world shaped by speed, transparency, and interconnectedness. They haven't just adapted to change, they were born into it. The digital tools that older generations had to learn are second nature to them. This isn't about knowing how to post on social media or navigate an app. It's about an intuitive grasp of systems that move fast and shift constantly. They understand how to reach people, how to iterate, how to experiment publicly, how to learn in real time. That instinct is invaluable in business because the world is no longer shaped by long cycles and cautious pivots. It's shaped by those who can adjust before the market finishes blinking. There's also something incredibly powerful about youth that often gets overlooked: urgency. When young people see a problem, they don't pause to ask whether they're qualified to solve it. They simply ask why it hasn't been solved yet, and then they move. This impatience isn't a flaw, it's an asset. It pushes systems that have become too comfortable. It questions inefficiencies that others have learned to live with, and it doesn't accept that this is just how things are. That mindset, combined with access to information and tools, creates a catalytic force that accelerates change where others have stalled. In business, this means we're already seeing entire sectors being reshaped by people barely out of their teens. Financial platforms, mental health apps, sustainable fashion, climate-focused innovations. Many of the most promising ideas are being developed and led by people who don't yet fit the traditional mold of an executive. And that's the point. The mold is changing. The ladder that once had to be climbed rung by rung is being bypassed by people who are building their own structures, not because they're defiant, but because the traditional path is too slow for the pace of problems they want to solve. What's also striking is how values-driven this generation is. Business for them isn't just about revenue, it's about responsibility. They are asking harder questions about what companies stand for, how they treat people, what kind of impact they leave behind. And when they build something of their own, they embed those values from the beginning. That makes them powerful founders, but also powerful employees, collaborators, and advisors. Because when you bring principle to the table along with talent, you build systems that don't just work well, they matter. Companies that still think of youth as potential rather than present are already behind. Because talent doesn't wait anymore. It doesn't line up and hope to be noticed. It builds, it launches, it grows in the open. The smartest businesses are the ones that listen early, share power quickly, and create cultures where the youngest voices aren't just heard. They're expected to lead. It's not about being generous. It's about staying relevant. If you want your organization to reflect the pace and priorities of the world ahead, you have to let the people already fluent in that world shape it. There's also no going back. The pandemic made this even more clear. Young people entered adulthood during a time of disruption, and instead of waiting for things to settle, they adapted. They found new ways to learn, to earn, to create. They redefined what work looks like, what leadership sounds like, and what ambition means. They don't want to follow in old footsteps. They want to make their own, and that instinct is not just admirable, it's effective. The future of business is already being built, and its architects aren't waiting to be noticed. They're not confined by what was. They're driven by what could be. The tools are in their hands. The ideas are already underway. And if you're not watching, collaborating, or learning from them, you're not just missing out. You're already behind. The question is no longer whether young people are capable of shaping tomorrow's businesses. They already are. The real question is, are the rest of us paying attention? Are we supporting them, learning from them, partnering with them? Or are we holding onto systems built for a slower, smaller world? Because the future doesn't wait for approval. It's being prototyped, pitched, and published right now by minds unburdened by tradition and fueled by purpose. And if we're wise, we won't just watch it happen, we'll help accelerate it. Because when youth move from idea to impact, the world doesn't just change, it gets better.